Titanic, the apple of White Star Line's eye. That successful child in the family who was constantly praised was exactly that kind of ship. Built with such meticulous care in Northern Ireland that upon its completion, it proudly earned the title of the world's largest steam passenger liner. And to top it all off, the ambitious slogan, "Even God couldn't sink him," was like breaking all the evil eye beads and saying, "Come on, fate, come get me." The ship is 269 meters long and 46,000 tons. Luxury? The most luxurious first class passengers generally live as if they are riding a cloud. But Titanic is a democratic ship. Rich and poor alike are on the same journey. Of course, when it sinks, everyone will sink. Apparently, they thought about it at the time. Then came that famous night. The first opportunities were to travel through the vast ocean and hit an iceberg. This, however, is like hitting a mast in one pass on the Konya plain. 2 hours and 40 minutes after the collision, Titanic sank. It could have changed the lives of 1,514 people. A massive daily cycle. But there's one interesting part. There are 2,223 people on board. But it should actually be 2,224. So, one person is missing. Why is that missing? That passenger had a ticket. Their ticket is ready, so confirm it, but they were able to get through due to weather conditions. Do you know who that person is? A Turkish doctor. Besim Miracle's man was probably only late once. He survived that day. Sometimes being late is a good thing. We can say that as a vivid example. A child playing with a toy. In the 1997 film Titanic, we see a child playing with a toy on deck. That scene is actually completely real. In this shot, taken on April 11, 1912, 6-year-old Robert Douglas Spedden is enjoying himself on the upper deck, spinning his top. He is a first-class passenger, the son of a wealthy family, one of the ship's VIPs. The family is returning from a trip, everything is fine, and they are all, "Nobody can sink me" on our ship. Then our hero, the iceberg, enters the picture. It takes the air out of our beloved, sleek ship. What does Robert do during the collision? Of course, he is sound asleep. When he briefly wakes up, his caretaker, Elizabeth Burns, tries to hide his panic by saying, "I'm going to look at the stars and come back." The child says, "Okay," and goes back to sleep. In the morning, the child wakes up and finds himself in a lifeboat. He survives the Titanic, but our little child, obsessed with whether life will let him down, is preparing a second twist of fate for him. He was killed by a car in 1915 at the age of 9. While cars were almost non-existent at the time, this is officially recorded as the first traffic accident in history. The iceberg that sank the Titanic. The iceberg that caused the Titanic sinking is a fact we all know. But what's truly remarkable is that 2 days before the disaster, the captain of another ship photographed that giant iceberg, quite by chance. This iceberg is believed to be the one that caused the Titanic's sinking. Captain Wood was the captain of the British merchant ship SS Etonian and also a keen photographer. As luck would have it, he happened to have the camera at his disposal that day, and he photographed the iceberg that would determine the Titanic's fate. As if that weren't enough, he also wrote down its coordinates. What a coincidence. These coordinates matched the exact spot where the Titanic had hit. Upon arrival in New York, he printed the photo and even mailed it to his grandfather, great-grandfather, whoever he was. He wrote in black ink, "Taken by the SS Etonian at 4 p.m. on April 12th, in latitude 41 degrees 50 minutes north and longitude 49 degrees 50 minutes west." Other iceberg photographs have emerged over the years, but Wood's always stands out because its shape perfectly matches eyewitness descriptions of "that's the iceberg." It is truly the famous portrait of the disaster. Third-class passengers. The next photo takes us into the world of the Titanic's third-class passengers, the economy class, but surprisingly not bad. These passengers shared a shared bathroom, ate in the same dining room, and slept in rooms occupied by 4. The word third class brings to mind poor conditions, but for most people it was even better than at home. It even rivaled the second class on other ships. The biggest advantage was that the meals were free. Most ships at the time had a "bring your own food, I swear I won't pay a dime." Back then, it was called the Pegasus system. Joking. Of course, the rooms were the noisiest and least desirable parts of the ship, but even having running water and electricity made the Titanic quite cool for the time. Single men stayed up front, families and women stayed behind. The cabins, due to the ship's shape, were a bit like Tetris pieces. Most were immigrants hoping for a new life in America. Unfortunately, only 25% of these dreams survived. The Titanic also sank into the ocean with hopes. Gym. The Titanic also had a gym. A kind of gym that, for its time, made one wonder. A gym on board? The only thing missing was a personal trainer. Located on the boat deck, just off the grand staircase, this lounge greeted visitors with its white painted oak walls and gleaming tile floor. A huge technical drawing of the ship hung on one wall, and the White Star Line's itineraries, a bit like "we're just cruising around the world," hung on the other. The equipment, 1912's version of technological madness. An electric camel, yes, a camel, an electric horse, sandbags, weight machines, a mechanical bicycle. First class passengers could try this entertainment package for a shilling. The gym was manned by physical education specialist T.W. Macaulay. He worked by the clock, strictly enforced gender and age rules, and posed as the manager of the Titanic Fitness Club. White Star Line marketed the space as riding horses, rowing, cycling, get some exercise and have fun. And the tragic finale. Macaulay did not abandon his post when the Titanic sank. He, along with the gym, was lost to history. Life jackets. This photo is a small souvenir from a passenger's album. You know, the famous saying, "there were enough life jackets for everyone on the Titanic," is technically true. The life jackets were cork-filled, linen-lined, and quite sturdy models. They were supposedly marvels of design. Of course, many passengers couldn't even access these miracle jackets during the sinking. Those who did broke their necks diving from such a height, drowned, or froze in the North Atlantic's natural deep freeze. In short, the jackets failed to fulfill their purpose successfully. It was a terrible tragedy. The heavy use of cork backfired, and although the jackets surfaced shortly after the sinking, they failed to protect the crew. Fortunately, after World War II, reason, logic, and science were reviled in life jacket design. The Titanic's ill-fated cork jackets thus went down in history as an example of "don't do that." Still, it doesn't matter to collectors. Bad design? They don't care. Someone bid $119,000 on one of these vests at auction. Everything related to the Titanic is still up for grabs. Swimming pool. When the White Star Line saw the concept of a swimming pool on the RMS Adriatic in 1906, they must have thought, "there's money in this," because they immediately incorporated a pool into the Titanic's design. Because the definition of luxury is clear: another pool filled with seawater in the middle of the sea. The Titanic's pool was hidden within the ship, a constant depth of 1.80 meters, heated saltwater. So, obviously it wasn't a spa, but it was cool enough to qualify as luxury. Of course, it was only for first-class passengers. After all, other classes weren't exactly welcome to have anything to do with water. Men could swim for free between 6 and 9 a.m. Women had to pay each time. Children weren't even looked after. Furthermore, admission to the pool cost about 25 cents, and the price included a swimming costume. Colonel Archibald Gracie had also enjoyed the pool the day before the sinking. He had planned to swim again the next morning, but fate decreed, no, not the pool today, but the lifeboat. Gracie survived and raved about the hot salt water in interviews. Inadequate lifeboats. It's now widely accepted that the lack of lifeboats played a significant role in the Titanic's sinking. This chilling photograph, taken by the Reverend F.M. Brown, shows the ship and a lifeboat side by side, as if to ask, "evacuation? What's that?" The Titanic was actually in full compliance with the 1894 Maritime Code. The problem was that the code was written for ships of 10,000 tons. The Titanic, however, was a colossal beast of nearly 50,000 tons, yet it only carried 20 lifeboats. In other words, the lavish safety package wasn't enough to save even half of the people on board. Because at the time, lifeboats weren't tools for saving everyone, but rather symbolic objects. and because the ship had watertight compartments, no one expected it to sink. The result? Only 700 of the 2,000 people fit in the lifeboats. Furthermore, the 65-person lifeboats were lowered with only 25 people. A drill? That was about to take place, but Captain Smith cancelled it, saying, "I don't want to miss my last Sunday service." Ironic but true. Just 2 years after the disaster, new regulations came into effect, and ships now have to carry enough lifeboats for everyone, even 125% of the time. First class dining room. This photo is of the Titanic's massive dining room, glossed as ultra luxury for its time. It could accommodate over 500 people at a time. It spanned 38 meters across. The room was elegantly decorated in white tones. Wealthy passengers found the ideal setting to both dine on exquisite dishes and discuss their own wealth. The food served in the dining room was presented with striking presentations worthy of a palace table. The menu was a veritable feast of ostentation. Delicious crabs, specially prepared quail, fresh fruit. In short, "Are you hungry? We're not." Meal times were also very disciplined. Breakfast 8 to 10, lunch 1 to 2:30, and dinner 7 to 8:15 p.m. Furthermore, these announcements were accompanied by the march "Roast Beef of Old England," played by pianist Peter W. Fletcher. So, when dinner time arrived, the entire room would be in a "gentlemen, ladies, the show is beginning" mood. And of course, the orchestra's music in the background. This was what wealth was all about. The Titanic's captain and accountant. This photograph shows the Titanic's British captain, Edward J. Smith, and the ship's accountant, Hugh Walter McElroy. The photo was taken by a passenger who had disembarked in Queenstown just 3 days before the disaster. So, the duo had no idea they would lose their lives in one of history's most famous maritime disasters. 3 days after the Titanic set sail from England, toward the evening of April 14, 1912, Captain Smith went about his Sunday routine. He inspected the ship, held a worship service, and then gathered with his officers to assess the ship's position. The result? "Everything is perfect. Our speed is excellent." However, by evening, the temperature had dropped to icy levels, and the North Atlantic surface had begun to appear mirrored, making it difficult to see icebergs. It was normal for icebergs to abound in the region in spring, but Captain Smith still chose to continue at full speed. Because why slow down, right? Then the infamous collision occurred. Smith wasn't on board, but as soon as he heard about the damage, he summoned designer Thomas Andrews. Andrews' assessment was terse. "Captain, this is over." The Titanic sank at 2:20 a.m. on April 15th. Captain Smith was reportedly last seen on the bridge. There were even claims that he saved a child, but most of these were unconfirmed. His body was never found.